I am Mark Mueller, and this is my special guest and friend of 5 or 6 years, Chris Searles. We talk about a lot of things on Truth and Justice League podcast. Sometimes we're very controversial, and sometimes we're not. Today is pretty much an easy topic, but in a very important one. Chris has been studying how to make things rain naturally by using water and trees. So, Chris, what is rainmaking with trees?
Well, all right. The biggest picture explanation is that it's how life on land survives. The old kind of ecological conception is that trees make rain move inland. And so if you go back hundreds of millions of years, this is trees acquire moisture from the atmosphere and then cycle it back out again and send it along the prevailing winds inland on a landscape. And when you rehydrate superlative trees or super large trees, then you can create the same effects that occur naturally over the last hundreds of millions of years, where they do the same thing. They share their moisture back into the atmosphere through the air. It goes on to other plants. And then if you work with enough trees, enough superlative trees, like say 10 to 25 trees, you can get enough of an effect from all of those trees cycling a few thousand gallons of water that'll actually change the atmosphere. It'll bring rain in, or it can catalyze rain to fall.
Well, how does watering trees bring rain or catalyze rain to fall?
It's a few different ways, and then because I've been doing it so much, I think there's more than just what I learned through reading the science. But the sort of mainstream in the science understood ways are that, number one, when a big tree gets rained on, it will take that moisture, and just like anyone else, we drink something and then you sort of exhale. So it'll release an air blast, and that'll send little particles off of the leaves like dust into the atmosphere that trigger the clouds to take that vapor that is a cloud and chill it into solid liquid, and then liquid just falls to the earth. So it's this miraculous process between tree leaves, moisture, biogenic dust is what they call it, and then the atmospheric moisture, all working together to cause rain to fall further downwind. But you have to have a catalyst. You have to have water on the leaves or water in the tree for it to be able to do that. It has to have hydration. The other main way is it will create I call it a cold cell, because the forest itself, a tree's natural internal temperature, we're 96 degrees or 98 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever it is. A tree's natural internal temperature is around 71 degrees Fahrenheit. So when you're in a heat wave and a drought, not only are they going to be thirsty and use that water vigorously, but when they release it back out into the atmosphere through the leaves, which is basically leaves have pores just like your skin, when they release that moisture out, it will chill the air because it's coming out cooler than the air temperature. That creates a cold cell. That cold cell creates a pressure relationship that then can draw in moisture from, according to the research and what I've seen, thousands of miles away, but definitely hundreds of miles away. And again, this is just sort of how the system works. And what I'm doing is trying to give it back moisture in strategic ways so we get the effects we want from that.
Well, let's talk about some of the things you've actually done. You have done. How long have you been working on this rainmaking project?
I've been experimenting with it since 2020, and then full time for about 2 years. So 5 years.
Okay. Now you've done work in, I know, Texas, Central Texas, and maybe West Texas. I know you've done work in New Mexico. I think you've done work in Arizona, and I know you've done work in Oregon, for example. Can you tell us a little bit about, one or more of those projects, what you were dealing with when you got there, why you chose where you were choosing, and what you did and what you saw?
Yeah. Those states plus California, also Northern California.
Yeah.
It's worked really well in all instances except one, in terms of the sort of technique, the set of techniques being applied the same way. And what you do is you look for a large continuum of forest, so like wilderness forest, ideally, uninterrupted forest. And then you water specifically at the edge of that forest so that it will attract moisture to that end, and then the forest will move it through itself. Very much like your body is a container, a porous container of moisture that's constantly cycling. A forest is that same idea. And so if I'm trying to, dehydration is the issue. So if I've got, use my body as an analogy, if my elbow and my neck are dehydrated, then I won't water down on my ankle. You know what I mean? I'll try to water up here in this arterial area that can send water both directions, to the elbow and to the neck. Same thing on a landscape structure. You look at how the forest is laid out, and you look at how the winds are going to move naturally, and then you just get to work with the hydration. And I have worked outside of Uvalde, Texas. I've worked outside of Kerrville. I've worked now in Harper and Lakey, and those are all sort of south and south central Texas. And then San Marcos, Hays County, Dripping Springs, Hays County, and a few different places inside Austin and Travis County. And in every one of these instances, what you do is you slowly water the trees in with trickle buckets and slowly saturate each large tree into an optimal state, a lush state. And you're basically taking a living thing out of crisis, hydration crisis, and moving it slowly into an optimal state of hydration. And because of what trees are physically, they will share that moisture, and the next big tree in this continuum of forest will take that moisture out of the air, cycle it, and it just passes on through. Again, like your body, like it's a system of independent components that know how to work together really well.
Do you use a special kind of soil and something called a sponging effect?
That is like the secondary project to help the forest gain capacity back, so you don't have to keep watering to stimulate the activity. The big picture analogy for me now is, or maybe it's not an analogy, the big picture for me now is that we're all born into a era of erosion. The sort of idea that trees don't know how to live and humans need to help them by pruning them is a real recent idea. Forests and trees have been around for hundreds of millions of years. Austin is about 150 years old now, barely 150 years old. We've only had electric saws and, gas-powered cutting equipment for 100, 200 years, for 100 years. And we've applied this thing that we can do universally for aesthetic reasons and for other good reasons, to make food, make structures, make our landscape safer, make beautiful things. But we haven't thought about what a tree actually is, which is a forest creature. So the resoiling with the soil sponge is much like the watering. It's like the most strategic way to give the tree back its most important capacity. And that's the biological life underneath the soil that interacts with the roots of the tree. And so there's the watering. There's 5 different ways that I apply this. So the rainmaking with trees is one. Then securing forests is what I call the soil sponge thing. And that's where you go and you take biologically rich soil and you install it next to the tree. You use a permaculture technique, which is just water rolls downhill, so that every time there's dew in the morning, it collects in your soil sponge. And your sponge is biologically rich, but it's also built so that it can endure extreme weather. And underground then, this tree that is currently undercapacitated because we've done so much, development on our landscape, so much clearing, underground, it starts to take a full life again. And the tree is able to get through these extreme cold events, extreme drought events, and so on and so forth, because now there's more life underground that all wants to hold and cycle moisture. When there's not enough life on the land, there's just not enough resources cycling moisture. So I'm working with biological resources from the microbial scale all the way to the superlative tree scale, because that's how the system actually works. Just like in your body, you've got microbia in your gut that if you lose those, you're in trouble. And once you nurture the microbial level, then you get the macro back.
So one thing we do have right now, I think everybody can agree upon, is there seems to be outbreaks of fires happening a lot, and extreme weather. There'll be drought. Other places there'll be tornadoes and what have you. We're not here to talk about the tornadoes, but the drought and the fire are things that end up causing a great deal of property damage, a great deal of destruction for the native plants and trees, and very some loss of life, some hazardous stuff, but tremendous upheaval in people, tremendous fear, and then then it seems to be what happens is there's a hunt for who's to blame for that.
Right.
Okay. Oftentimes there are people you can point to that made conditions that made it worse, but actually you've thought about this, and I know that you believe that these fires can be prevented or reduced greatly by following your techniques. And is there any more you want to add about how that is done other than what you've already said to us?
Oh, I mean, we could talk about that a long time.
Well, let's start.
I mean, it's so simple. It's kind of I try not to get angsty for me time because it's so simple. The solution is so simple. It's just rehydrate the landscape, and it doesn't take much water. So then what people can do is, I mentioned the 5 things. So one of the 5 aspects we're calling water, trees, and forests, WTF. And that's the idea of each person get a 10-gallon bucket or a 5-gallon bucket and fill it twice. Water the biggest tree that you're close to or the biggest trees that you can get close to. 10 gallons at a session, do that 20 times. It can be 20 days in a row. It can be 20 months in a row. But just get water back into that tree. That is the most powerful way to move moisture across the entire landscape. So if you're trying to prevent fire, you want green things. Green things don't catch on fire. And I've seen some of these forest fires that are, insane, where you see entire cars incinerated into nothing but just the shell and the steering wheel stick. There's no glass, there's no aluminum, there's no rubber, there's no interior. And then there'll be a green plant just a few feet away from that fire. The ability of plants to reject fire, to move air in certain ways that pushes it away, I think we should investigate that with specifically with the types of things I'm doing. Because as I've been out on the road, people have said, well, we almost had a fire here in 2020, whatever, and then we immediately started watering our trees and it turned and went the other way. And I've seen that I've done that as well. I've seen that happen as well. In terms of big scale, I mean, I think we could eliminate wildfire forever this summer. And I posted a plan on the BioIntegrity website for the U.S. Forest Service, and it's just 9 teams, 18 people, because what I was able to get done in Oregon alone, and I haven't had any press on this yet, but the reality is I got rain on that August 17th on a day in Oregon where it was maybe a 5% probability of rain, and that time of year, no one was expecting it as the worst fire season in Oregon history by a factor of 2. And then we get the rain on August 17th, and it breaks the back of that fire season. And it didn't really return. I got several more rains after that. But that initial rain in the middle of August 2024 just severed the extreme fire that was happening. Getting our first drops in Eugene. There she goes. Just got rain for the 3rd time. They had nice showers, like a heavier shower, and now we've got the light showers going. So the second rain was last night. First rain was last Saturday. This is Friday, 1:30 in the afternoon. Nice, heavier, a little bit of thunder. It's almost 9 p.m. We're getting just kind of drizzle bits, for lack of a better word. So they went from losing something like, I should have looked at the numbers, but it's something like 6,000 acres a day down to 350 a day, or 50,000 a day to 6,000 a day, whatever the number was. It's like a factor of 10 reduction overnight. And this is one guy with a Beverly Hillbillies jalopy truck and 2 big beverage containers I was able to water 1,000 gallons a day in my 2 sites. I did in 8 or 9 days, 9,000 gallons, 8,000 gallons. A swimming pool, a backyard swimming pool is 20,000 gallons. So I used less than half of a swimming pool to get that rain to come into Oregon and knock out the fire season. The reason I'm confident in talking about that is because it's the 10th time I've done a regional project. That was the biggest deployment of strategic watering, the third piece of this puzzle that we're talking about, of how to use irrigation of forests to move moisture over large landscapes. But that strategic watering, that was a really good placement, and water just went all over into Idaho, Northern California, Washington State, and Oregon. And I only tracked the burn rate cut we got in Oregon. Before that, I was so in other words, it was also significant in helping Idaho, Washington, and Northern California. And it's not me. It's not like I'm a superhero. It's that the forest is built this way. That's how it grew, was to share moisture. So I just locate in an arterial place. And the same thing in Arizona, the same thing in New Mexico, the same thing in South Texas, same thing in Central Texas. It works every time. You just have to get the right water moving, or the water moving from the right places, rather.
Well, there's something that occurs to me that is important for people to understand, and that is forest preservation.
Yes.
Because one of the topics, without getting too deep into political stuff right now, one of the topics that is sort of up for grabs and has been part of the new executive orders and what have you, is for economic gain, is to start making better use of public lands that are owned by the feds. And there's a lot of them. Some of them are parks, some are national wildlife areas and forests and what have you, and others are just areas of land that have trees and other things on them. That concerns me because I could see we could have it's not been done yet, and hopefully things will be studied properly. But it seems to me like that very quickly, if there was a big move toward essentially clear cutting in any which way, or even close to clear cutting, we're going to remove an awful lot of trees real fast. And now we're going to shock the system. What do you think about that?
I agree. Yeah, completely. One positive or two positives. So that's Trump driving the idea of we need to clear more land. And that's just the common thought right now. But Trump said when he was running, about in California, he said, why don't they just water the trees? And
yeah,
he's right. And then, 1,000% on that. And then
right.
The other thing is, I was just down in Lakey, like we were talking about, and talking to various farmers and landowners and stuff, and everyone's trying to do the right thing. And Harper, they're farmers, and they've been taught that you get rid of trees so that the main trees you want to keep get more water. And that, I can explain why I think that was apparently true for such a long time, but we're over the hill on that now. It's too far. We've done too much clearing. The way moisture moves over the landscape is through leaves. And so the fewer leaves we have, the less moisture we have at landscape level. And you go to a place like LA, where we have so much media, for instance, and you got me out there, and
yeah.
I was so confused for about 10 days, and I finally kind of wrapped my head around it. But it's the moisture in the air coming off of the ocean there that makes LA's trees so beautiful. There's so many trees that are completely collared with cement at the bottom of the trunk. And I would wager that 98 to 99% of LA is just concrete and rooftops and asphalt. There's like no soil in that town, and you just drive forever and you won't find any dirt. So how do things survive when there's no water getting to the roots, right? And
right.
That's this air-based moisture circulation intelligence that trees and plants have. Because LA is beautiful, right? But then it's also the enormous resource of the Pacific Ocean right there. And so there's a constant supply moving through the air. And obviously there's, a lot to talk about with how they ended up in fire season that they're in now. I can explain some of that too.
Yeah.
But the basic idea of how do you protect your trees, protect your property, prevent fire, get your plants to grow, all this stuff. We've been teaching ourselves you do it by clearing the land for hundreds of years since our recent agriculture, and it's actually not the way it works. The reason it worked that way for a long time is because there were so few people doing it. It gave the impression that, now we've got a paradise and we're still lots of trees. But if you look at the rate of deforestation in the last 150 years, in the last 50 years, in the last 5 years, it's like, appalling if you're a tree person, because we're losing so many large old growth trees. Yeah. And the bigger the canopy, the better the capacity. It's like football. The bigger the player, the more you can get out of that capacity.
Well, it seems like a good opportunity for people to encourage, however they can, for our administrators and the president. If we said that before, right? So to get on board with this. This is an easier one to solve, right? Because
very easy.
This makes sense. It works.
It's cheap.
And when we look at, I was in LA. I came out to LA a little after you did. We did. You wanted to go out to LA, and I was on board with that on behalf of our Truth and Justice League. We thought that was an opportunity. Wish we could have done it a couple weeks earlier.
Right.
But we did what we could under the circumstances. But I was out there after you were, but I was down in South, in Carlsbad area, and we were following everything very carefully because it was like they basically left the city. Everybody was bailing on the city. There were traffic jams, and people were jamming up the hotels and staying everywhere they could, as far down as San Diego. And but tell us what it was horrible, and it's so expensive that. It's kind of late in the game as far as I'm concerned to be apportioning fault to decide how many of these billions of dollars come back in some way, shape, or form. I think it's necessary to put some responsibility on things, but it just seems like such an enormous waste of resources to not think ahead and prevent this from happening. So tell us a little bit about when you got out to LA, what sort of things you encountered, because it didn't go the way you expected it.
Yeah.
So I was there. I was hearing from you. So tell us what you saw on the ground and how we can learn from that experience, because we got to learn and try to make things better. Otherwise, we're stuck in the past.
And we're still doing the same things.
Yeah.
No brown nosing. First of all, to the cameras and everything. You got me out there, and then you were very steady the whole time I was out there. And our plan A, B, and C really didn't result the way we thought they would, and you stayed steady the whole time, and I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I'm super excited about it.
Thanks for doing what you did.
Well, and it made a difference. But the first thing that happened was we thought we had a team of farmers with trucks and water, and I was going to land, and they were going to show up at the airport with pitchforks and water buckets, and it was going to be like this incredible civic event where we rode in and saved the nation. And then the person that was the contact on that, he lost everything in the Altadena fire. So I didn't hear from him for the first 24 hours. And I heard from him the next day, and he's like, I just woke up, I don't know what happened. I lost everything. I've been sick. Okay, well, don't worry, And he's like, I can't, all my people are gone. No, like you said, everyone's out. We got hit hard by this fire, so I can't help you right now. Okay, man, don't worry. Well, I'll find another way. So then I started going to the city of Beverly Hills, and because they have the best trees for this technique, and the California State Parks, the Malibu Creek State Park people, Pepperdine University, and Chris Prusiecki was really helpful with all this stuff. And in each circumstance, what I found was that people were quizzical, and they seemed to believe me, but they didn't know how to take the information through their system and implement it, because it was a crisis situation. I got out there on Tuesday after the fires had burned through the Palisades that weekend. And so I could tell that things actually had calmed down and were going pretty well from the standpoint of a crisis. And if we did this, we could bring rain in a certain way. And that's what I was trying to get people to do. But, of course, I'm just some stranger. And people were really great and receptive, but it wasn't an easy time to get the needle to move. And the logistics with law enforcement from, all the levels, plus military everywhere, to protect from looting, just made it hard to operate quickly. And then, miraculously, the the rains that came were exactly the rains that we would have tried to get. And I watched that happen. And that I don't really understand, but the way it rolled in was like it came in soft and misty, and then the next day a light rain, and the next day a heavier rain kind of thing. This is what you can do with rainmaking with trees, and it's why I think these forest systems are actually intelligent in the same way your body is intelligent. That I call it the plant body. Like I drink liquid, and if I'm dehydrated, I don't have to think anything. My body will figure out where the water goes. The forest systems seem to do that at landscape scale, based on my experience so far. And I watched it happen thanks to the ocean moisture circulation instead of me stimulating it by bringing water to the trees. And so then at that point, it was trying to get projects going with the city of LA, and they were receptive. But again, it's just kind of like, well, we've got all these things we're doing here, and if you can get $1 million insurance policy and then $1 million indemnification policy, then we'll look at your proposal. And I just don't quite have all the, steps or whatever people to put all those things together today.
Right. So you ran across a little red tape.
Ran into some red tape. And meanwhile, the fires are, the drought got worse in Texas. And I mean, it's bad everywhere. So I've been trying to figure out how to adjust and move the information forward. So I've repositioned back on Texas for now.
Well, it seems like, and we've talked about this before, there are a lot of people who care about this. There's a lot of people that can be available to do helping in some way. Because it's not that complicated. Like
Right.
You're freely available to help tell people what to do and, guide them. We just need to multiply
Yeah.
the forces out there, right? And so I'm thinking, wow, we've got so many natural groups here that, we could have I guess the Boy Scouts is now Boys and Girls. Are they still have a Girl Scouts? I don't know, but there's Scouts.
Right.
There's military. There's schools. There's forestry schools. There are, cities that have departments and things like that. And then there's neighborhood associations. There's people that own the land. And then there's people that have already networks, like people that do festivals, people that do Burning Man.
Yeah.
There are natural groups that it seems like they're everywhere. They could be spread out, and they're very relatively, some of them are very community oriented, and it seems like that we have the resources, let's connect them.
Yeah, that's all we need to do. And sorry to interrupt, but I think it's just now that sort of pushing the ball up that hill. I want to work with hunters and farmers and ranchers as soon as possible, because it crosses over all the boundaries of anything. I mean, anybody that needs good land for any reason
Right.
needs hydration, and forests or hunters tend to be in treed areas because there's more life there. And there are just so many potentials for bringing people together on this simple way to get us out of this crisis. And again, it's like if you can afford a bucket from Home Depot and you can put a small hole in it, one strike with a nail,
Yep.
and then you can fill that with water a couple times a day for 20 days in a row per tree, you can really make a difference for your tree. And, it takes you 2 trips to the bucket.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this, like, whole new space is how we can work together without having to talk about our politics, even just talking about how we're going to make things way better quickly for a small amount of water.
I don't think the trees care
Right.
what the politics are of the people that are watering them.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's an opportunity for people to do things together and see that it works.
Yes.
Which I think we need to do. I personally, and I think most people I talk to, are just on any side of a political spectrum, on any side of this, except for the rare individual who just wants to be hostile. The fighting and the bickering and the arguing is getting exhausting.
The anger mind virus.
It's the anger mind virus, yeah, and it's taken us away from trying to, work together and do positive things.
Yeah.
It's enormously destructive. Yeah.
Yeah, to the soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just all give up. We're all just like, well, there's really no reason to have hope now. And that's kind of the tone of the day. And so we've turned into the cynical society we never wanted to become. And this is one way to really move out of it.
Yeah.
I think it's the most powerful way, but we haven't tested it yet. So let's do that test.
Well, how do we get people to get out of the house and off the devices and go for a walk
Yeah.
and water a tree.
Yeah.
Okay, water a tree in their backyard. How do we get people to become daily part-time gardeners or weekly part-time gardeners? Because we have, a huge population in this country.
We're the most capable people in history.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
it seems so easy to be able to do something like that.
No one's ever been this resourced,
Yeah. So how do we start a campaign where we get that going? So it's like, people become like bucket masters, or sponge makers.
I'm taking bucket masters.
Okay.
Like I get out of bed every day because I want to water trees. That gets me excited. But in terms of like a big, big mission, I really think we're going to keep making, toxic, stupid decisions forever until we have a higher standard about what reality is for us. And to me, the best answer right now is it's a biosphere. There's lots of interesting ideas about the universe and, creation and what does it mean, the aliens and all these things. But from my perspective, that stuff doesn't really matter. What matters is whether or not we're going to live today and tomorrow, and that's life support system dependent. That's the planetary biosphere. That's your body. They're both biospheres. They're both systems made of living things. And when we hopefully move into an era of being in touch with it and aware and awake about it, where we're excited about how miraculous it is, then we can quickly shift these tides from just making stupid decisions because they make us money into like, oh, okay, well, why don't we find someone who's smart enough to get rid of the bad chemicals in whatever it is, this paint, because we don't need this mug for 10,000 years. We only need it for 2 years, and we can make so many adjustments quickly. We have tons of technology, and now with AI and nano and stuff, we can dig materials out of landfills. We don't need to necessarily keep making trash. We can repurpose, and there's so many bright points just over the hill of where we are today. But I feel like we've been in the paradigm of, extractive capitalism really all along. The patriarchal kind of world where a strong man comes in and builds a fortress, and then everybody eats a little better, and that guy gets to determine the rules until somebody comes along and topples that kingdom, and in the meantime, the kingdom expands. So you lose the Holy Land in Israel or whatever because somebody ran out of resources further to the west, and they went east into Israel, and we have these land conflicts over time that are basically about getting the milk and honey for the victor out of each land or expanding their control over a territory. It's never about what's good for the biosphere, what's good for the life support system, because it's so much bigger than we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the long walk uphill. I went through, and you and I haven't had a chance to have a personal conversation since LA, but man, the last 6 months have been heartbreaking because I came back from Oregon in early October. And, especially from my perspective, where I'm living in this stuff, I'm posting only on Facebook because I can't manage all the socials. But every day, and here I'm doing this, now there's a little cloud. Now there's lots of clouds. Now there's rain. Now I'm going to go to the new location. Look, same process. Again and again and again for 3 months of the summer. And then I go to some journalists I know who are the best in the world at conservation-oriented journalism. And I go to the landscape eco-restoration people. And I go to, the state climatologist and my friend who's the county commissioner in Travis County, who I've known for 20 years personally, and on and on and on, various people that should be at least intellectually curious, This guy says he can make it rain, and so far he's never been crazy. Did he just become crazy? Or is there something here? And then if you take, I'm telling you, 1 minute, look at the first page of any of these reports or any of these videos, like there's something here. This guy keeps doing this again and again and again. It's like, how do you have this many coincidences, this many years in a row? And he's making bolder predictions, and they keep coming to pass because he's reading the landscape. What is that? Instead, what I'm getting is just people saying, I'm not seeing the data that I need to see. And you're like, that's not my gig, bro. I'm the rainmaker trying to figure out how to make the rain come. I'm not the person writing the study. I'm only trying to write something down so you can come write the study.
Right.
That's your expertise. And the response has been basically just people are afraid to sort of get out of the box so far. But then like the younger generation, the Gen Z folks, particularly young men right now, seem to be, I don't know many Gen Z young women, but they seem to be really curious. And so I think there's going to be, and then there's the hippies at the Continental Club, where I go on Thursdays to play music. They're curious, they're excited, they're watching the videos, and they say, I don't know what you do, but you show up and there's drought everywhere, and a few days later there's clouds and then there's rain. I see you doing this thing again and again. So I think it's like people have to see it to believe it, and then want to get involved, and then find time to do it, and then do it, and then enjoy it, and then make it part of their lives. Again, like that's natural for me now, but for someone else to make that pattern shift is a big deal. And so the younger Gen Z people who are looking for, I'm not saying they're the solution or anything, but I think it's a more viable place for what I'm doing, because they're looking for a solution. They all, again, they're looking at the future going, this is ridiculous. What have y'all done for us? You've created a doomy future. How the hell do we get out of this? And here I am like, yeah, we can do it. We can get out of this. We can get out of this year, 2025. We can get out of it in the next few months if we really get on it. But like you feel, where is everybody? How do we get people involved? And I think that's just, that's part of the pain of trying to birth a baby, as it were, and we're trying to build not a movement necessarily, but a new awareness where people can try something that's new. People have always been taught to cut trees and prune things to increase water efficiency, and it's kind of the other way around. You need to let it grow and give it a little water. And so it's a big shift. Yeah. And I think it will happen. Well, I just think it's too late. Like the sooner the better, and that's my consternation. Like with what you're saying, how do we get people involved? Like, I don't know exactly, but I know it's starting to happen. Yeah. And I know that I can rely on I gave this presentation when I got back from Oregon called Biospheric Benestrophy. And benestrophy is the opposite of a catastrophe. So beneficial, outcome, a really big, good thing happening. And that's a concept that we don't even have in society, But a benestrophy is like the birth of a child, or when you drink water and you're thirsty, like suddenly, boom, your state shifts into a good place. And that's the power of life. In reality, it's this miraculous power to thrive. And when you get it into a good way, it tries to thrive. We don't know that yet. We don't know that religiously, societally, legally, economically. We just know that all that backdrop there of trees and agriculture has always been there, But we don't really recognize it as a creative forces. It sounds a little reductionist, but that's what it is. It's like this power of constantly seeking an optimum state.
Well, it's a dynamic.
Which is what we do intellectually. We're trying to be rich and party all the time or whatever it is for people. But it's just a full body state that you want to be in, a happy emotion, and a good night's sleep and all that stuff. It's the same for the plant body of the landscape.
Well, it seems to me like, keeping the trees and plants healthy and happy and hydrated makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
It just does. And then with what you've got, I see that, people are going to be like, where's your data? What are what's the study? But, we can study this one to death. But when your numbers look like they look like, okay, which is you're getting the stuff, a high probability of the time. But why don't you tell us?
It's 100% of the time that I can get rain. It just has to fit into a certain protocol, but I can guarantee it now.
Well, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
So, yeah, you're seeing really good success level. And it's kind of like, well, if you got a sports team that's winning most of their games, does it really matter why?
Right. How high is the batting average is not your first question anymore.
Who's winning? How's it going?
The Yankees, yeah.
Yeah. And this one is something where, well, we do need to get back in touch with nature. So that's obvious. Nature sustains us, and it has for a long time. It's a spiritual connection. It's a heart connection.
And to maybe jump in on that, the thing that we were talking about right before we started rolling is I've mentioned Vine Deloria. There's this little 5-minute segment on YouTube where he's talking about how Indians, Native Americans, are misunderstood. He calls them Indians. Vine Deloria is the Native American intellectual that we talked about. And to try and sum it up really quickly, he says, even in the social sciences, in the Western world, the sort of Judeo-Christian intellectual construct that we live in here in the West. Even in the social sciences, academically, they don't acknowledge that it's essentially the feelings that make life valuable. It's not the fact that I have the shoes that I like on right now. It's that the shoes make me feel good. You know what I mean? It's the materialism is there for so many important purposes, but it's, physical and emotional feelings that really determine your well-being. And the social sciences are so materialistic that we are still not talking about what that means. Emotions are intangible. Spirit is intangible. We don't have a real way to talk about this in the West. But for Native American people, or according to Vine, for Indians, like everything is clearly derived from spirit. You can't, I say this maybe too much, but again, I can't explain why I grew this way. I just showed up. And I have this incredible body that I'm running around in, trying to do things with my life. But there's a where do we come from question here. Not just the worlds that I'm familiar with are so focused on death and fear of failure in life and the struggles and all that stuff. But the reality is also based in the miracle of existence itself, and that it doesn't come from materialism. There's something before that. If we can get into a place, I think, where we are more engaged with other species and trying to nurture them, care for them, be aware of them. The great thing about watering trees is they breathe. They're just basically this part of your anatomy. We're 50% the same DNA as a tree anyway, so they're like a bronchial species. If you get into caring for them, you hear their breath, you feel the breath, the cooling air moves across the landscape, and it changes the way you feel, and suddenly you're interacting with a world that isn't purely materialistic. Like you said, you have a reason to go outside that's not just like a box you want to check. Now it's like a song you want to hear. It's a feeling that you get, it pulls you into that interaction because it's rewarding. And I think that's kind of also part of the answer to your question is, and our opportunity here, because we've denied this existence of spirit and, female points of view for so long. It's time to go ahead and grow up a little bit and become, bigger people.
This ties in with, I have in my career represented some, I will call it Native Americans, in the United States, the Blackfoot,
I saw that
in a land case, and the Lakota Sioux up in South Dakota, and in Mexico, the Huichol, and all of them have a reverence for nature. And they talk about they talk about the trees as their relations, and the water as something that is carrying of knowledge and wisdom and all this kind of stuff, right? So that's how they treat it. It's all sacred. Okay. When I was doing my Blackfoot case involving keeping oil and gas drilling out of a sacred wilderness area, the native concept was this whole area is sacred. Not that you can segregate it and have a pathway that's cement here and then you saved off a little bit of land over here.
Yeah, the church is over there.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
It's all sacred. And when you think about that, I mean, it may sound woo-woo or new age or whatever, but, it was a very successful way to live in harmony with nature.
Well, I was given some of that stuff because, my family story, not to take any time on it, but it is a little bit unique in that my dad was a pastor or minister, and I call him the Buddhist Baptist because he came from this Kentucky culture, and his way out of poverty was to go into ministry. But I think as a high school kid, his attraction for him was, wow, look at all these people doing good stuff here. He was a football player, and the coach said, you stop drinking sodas, you start getting good grades, and you go to church, and you can be on the team. And he went to church as a 16-year-old kid or whatever, and suddenly he was out of kind of an abusive home, and he joined the choir. But the pastor at that church became famous in Baptist history. It's this guy Carlisle Marney, and Carlisle ended up at First Baptist Church in Austin after that post, and then my dad ended up there after Carlisle left. And so there's this incredible history of these men of extreme, I call them welcoming men of extreme integrity who are friendly. And that's such a upside down paradigm to where we are right now with what a man is, you know. But I was raised by men who literally, you know, because my dad was a pastor and my mother's a very serious Christian, we were at church every Wednesday and every Sunday, my entire childhood. But every time you walk in the door, hey, how are you? How are you doing? You know, and that kind of repetition, man, you know, you just feel like people care about each other. And I don't see that happening anywhere in the world right now, you know. And I left childhood thinking that was the way the world was going to develop. And then I saw it go this other way. I just feel like we kind of to the point too about feelings and stuff, you know, probably if you look at it, I haven't really thought this out, but sorry, it's the pollen from all the successful spring. But if you look at like the political revolution, what is winning is, like we were talking about a minute ago, it's feelings, you know, just like the way people use their phones. I like this, I don't like this. It's a very simple relationship, and then they'll dive deeper. But you try to make the contact on the feelings piece. And right now, feelings are just negative, you know, and that's a form of empowerment. If you're pissed off at some boogeyman over there, then you know you're pissed off. You know what I mean? You can be strong in your righteous indignation, whether it's for Biden or against Biden, you know, whether it's about a political thing or some other thing. But anger is empowerment. Anger is a feeling of certainty. And what do you do about that? Well, I mean, first of all, a lot of that anger is rooted in nonsense and you know, incorrect information. But then second of all, maybe we have to just try and go live in the good side and get more people to join us, because the thing I want people, the thing I think people want is to feel safe and secure and like in kinship with their community. So they're an important person. They're a valuable person in a nurturing community. You know, I see you, I see you, I see you. Everyone here is important. And that's so hard for current society, even here in the, you know, wealthy United States for whatever reason. But if we can sort of shift the paradigm into being more like trees, you know, trees are very welcoming, very agreeable. They love having people around. And you find that out when you're out there watering. You know, you just feel this thing. There's like in terms of trees being welcoming and welcoming men as the stereotype or whatever for a masculine identity. I have a friend who's a professor at ACC, and she said she would give her English students an assignment where they'd go spend 15 minutes with a tree and turn their phone off and just sit there with the tree. And every student would say, there's no way I can do that. And because this is 2018, when smartphones were really new for people. But then every student that did it would write about how they felt like the tree recognized them and knew them. And this is hundreds of people, you know, over multiple semesters. So there's the validation of self is missing, you know, from society. We're so busy trying to make ends meet and make the right impression to make ends meet and all that stuff. We don't have very many places that are just like, I'm so glad you're here, you know? And that's maybe part of the antidote to.
Well, you're reminding me of something, because we're in this old historic part of Austin, and we still have a few trees left here, but not many, because, you know, the big skyscrapers are wiping things out. But we have a big old 100 years old oak in the front of the office building over here. I was told, you know, by some of my spiritual teachers that said, you know, these trees are alive and they've been around a long time. They have wisdom, and, you know, you can go and actually be on that tree, hug the tree, touch the tree, and see how you feel, and then release all your stuff into that tree. Mm-hmm. Tell that tree every bad thing that you did, or every bad thing that was done to you, or every lousy feeling that you have. Dump it all on the tree. And the tree somehow manages to convert that energy into something positive. And when you leave that tree, you feel better, because you have dropped a big psychic load.
Right.
Okay?
Your baggage.
You dropped your baggage. And the same kind of concept, there's a trial lawyer named Jerry Spence, who's he's up there now, but he was the most legendary trial lawyer in the country for decades.
I say, I didn't do this. I didn't get into this business to to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I work more than that. I work from 5 o'clock in the morning until I drop at night in bed. It isn't a good life in some ways, and yet to me it's what my life is. It's my passion.
And I studied with him up in Wyoming at his trawler academy. And one of the things we did were walk in silence. We would also do a morning hike up basically a small mountain. But the other thing was trees, like we're talking about. Like,
no kidding.
Talk to the tree, sit by the tree, be there with the tree, hug the tree, and do it for long enough that you're uncomfortable.
Jerry Spence taught this.
Yes.
You're serious? Jerry Spence taught to listen to the trees?
Jerry
the number one trialer.
Yep. He taught to
That's
listen
amazing.
to trees and to speak to the trees and to...
This is not a woo-woo spiritually guy. This is a legal win-a-trial guy.
This was the nation's number one trial lawyer who... that was what he said. Give it back to the
Go
earth.
to an intelligence bigger than your own.
Go to something bigger than you and tell it all. Okay, look, a lot of people in those programs, well, we're all humans. The trialers groups are, if anything, possibly more screwed up than a lot of people because they're dealing with a lot of tension, a lot of pressure, often come with
high stakes,
and also comes with divorce, infidelity, drugs, alcohol, putting that stuff someplace. Sometimes it came from having a really tough childhood and tough life, and you're proving yourself now, okay? But at some point, that becomes too much to carry. But where do you start? I mean, people do bad things. So in the world of things, people do bad things. People do things they're not proud of that they don't want to tell other people. Anybody. They don't want to tell their priest. They don't want to tell their pastor. They don't want to tell their wife, their husband, whatever. Bad in their mind. Shame, holding them back, right? Well, the tree doesn't care.
Right.
Okay, so the tree can accept all of that. You can tell the tree whatever, and the tree's not going to tell anybody.
Right.
Right? Which is great. It's a safe space. So the trees are ultimately a very safe space for people.
Yeah.
And the forests, going into a real forest, okay, is pretty amazing because it's, the energy of the forest and the quiet, is interesting. I mean, it has its own sounds. It has its own noise.
And its own acoustics.
But it's very different than the concrete jungle that you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And getting in there, if you open up to it, it is a spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it is rejuvenating. And really, everybody should do it. Bobby Kennedy, like him or not, speaks about these kind of topics. He's pretty big into nature, grew up learning about these kinds of things, and grew up to be an environmentalist. And he speaks often about that we need to preserve our lands and our nature and our woods and our water because that is our contact with God. So that is what
that's a big conversation I hope we get to have too.
That's a big conversation. And and when you hear it that way, and that everyone, of course we're all connected at all times, but everyone really should be able to have those special experiences where it's easier to get in this because you're out of the combat zone of the city or your home life or whatever, and you're now into the nature, nurture, life that's out there. Very powerful.
Yes. Yeah, the whole idea of one of the ways we've gotten so derailed societally is this attack of DEI and wokeism and all that stuff. But the whole idea of inclusion is basically like, I like you for who you say you are, not who I tell you to be. And I think everybody wants to be celebrated for their truth and their identity. They maybe have different types of identities that don't agree with each other, but the idea that one identity would limit another, nobody wants to be limited or controlled. And so, white guys like us have it the easiest in this day and age, usually, at rolling around in our identity. And a lot of other people would like to have that access to life as well. And then we start arguing about, nonsense. But trees, to your point, like, I think of them as large dogs in terms of their nature, not cats, but dogs. They're always happy to see you. They're always interested in what's going on with you. Now, it's not, licking your kneecaps or whatever, but the way they interact, they're always like, when you're really paying attention, I don't know the spiritual side as much as I know the biophysical side, and it's alive. Just like you're talking, I know you're breathing. You know what I mean? The tree, I can hear, see, feel its breath. And when you come around trees, the character of the way the leaves flow will interact differently, change.
Yeah.
When you give them water, of course, they get healthier. The light changes. And you start to get a sense, again, like these students that were writing these essays, like, this tree is real happy I'm here. These trees are happy to see me. And I've been in so many places repeatedly that I'm pretty sure that animals and trees recognize me in certain places and are happy I'm there. And everyone can have that experience. Again, I'm not special. I'm just the first one in the place.
I have a magical story for you. I went to attended a 2-year program to learn some things about spiritual and shamanic practices. Okay. Not pretending to be a guru. I don't call myself anything I'm not.
But you've studied quite a bit. You've
but
invested your time in it.
I went to the programs, and we often went to powerful places in nature. And one of the places that we went to was the Chiricahua Mountains in southern Arizona. And it was the last refuge of Geronimo. And it is wild country. He could go in there and get lost. And he stayed there gone for a long time. They couldn't get him. The military was after him, but they couldn't get him. But the area is both wooded and mountainous.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's a lot of trees in there. Mm-hmm. And we had a group of about 20 of us, and we got to we got to basically a high point on the land. Okay, so sort of a prominent area in the land, and our group leader, Jose Stevens, who's written books and is a well-known authority on stuff, he said, he told us, he said, the trees and the plants and even the rocks are alive, okay, and I will show you this, okay, and if you send out welcoming vibes and information and speak in that way to the trees, they will respond. And so he started talking about this, right? Like telling the trees. I mean, we're talking about a large group of trees down, below us, not right in front of us, but maybe 50 yards away. And he's telling the trees, you're really beautiful trees, and I'm so grateful that you're here today and all the support that you're giving us. I'm so grateful for this, and I just wanted to thank you so much. And he was like that kind of language. Okay.
Yeah, you have to talk to them like babies.
And he was doing that like that, exactly like that. And then he started essentially whistling. Okay, essentially whistling, like and this, and here's what happened. I swear to God, we all saw it happen. Otherwise, I'd be like, "Well, this sounds crazy. This couldn't happen."
This is probably why you talked to me, is because you saw this thing happen.
There was no visible breeze happening. Okay, but it was phenomenal. Like what?
You saw limbs move.
Oh, well, they started swaying back and forth. Okay, the large segments of this wooded land were just swaying like back and forth to the tunes that he was saying, and this sort of like sing-songy whistling and sound that he was making. They started doing this. Okay, and then so that was happening, and we're going, heck,
Where's the breeze? Where's the breeze?
Is this really happening?
Yeah.
Right. And then our group that we had our nickname that we had was the Ravens. That was just our animal guide, whatever it was, and so the trees are swaying back and forth gently in this, like all of a sudden the world got very peaceful, and then here comes
a raven.
Yes. Okay, and the raven starts flying around a little circle, and here comes another raven, right?
Wow.
And so I might not have the exact numbers right, but the trees were swaying, the ravens were coming into play, and we were all of us were sitting there looking at each other, going, "Wow, this is really happening."
Right.
Okay, it was very clear. Okay, now after you get out of there, you go, well, did that really happen? But it did really happen.
This has been one of the topics for me of the last week is I've been trying to find ways to tell people that trees can move their limbs without wind. And I was pretty sure, 90% sure, yada, yada. And then the other day, I saw the exact movement. I was like, there it is. It's just real simple, But then what you're talking about is a much better example. But this is another thing about how they're alive, And I feel like we live in a Home Depot mentality about trees, where it's just like, yeah, there's things in the back there. Wouldn't it be great to have some lawn furniture up here? Mm-hmm. Well, don't worry about the trees, but what can you put here? And they're so alive, like these native people or indigenous people you're saying think of the trees in Mexico as relatives. I mean, I think of them as people also. They're just not cognitive people, It's a different type of intelligence. But the ability of trees to move their limbs, you'll see, especially when you're doing the watering, you'll see the limb go down sometimes, and then the breeze comes. And I've seen this so many hundreds of times, but I wasn't sure of it. And I just started kind of clocking it, And this, again, is like, we're missing out on an incredibly rich world of relationships that are miracles. It's like reality is a miracle. And that's what you get by spending time with these other species, because they are as alive and intelligent as they have to be to succeed for hundreds of millions of years.
And you look
like
at this,
without Amazon.com, how did they do that? So
well, one of the ways they do it is they communicate somehow above ground, and now of course the native people always knew this. Now this is being measured, right? So there'll be something that happens. One plant perceives it, and that is communicated down the road. Essentially, something's going on, whether it's danger or whether it's something else. Something happens, and they respond. That's what you're seeing above the ground. But then we have the roots and those things, right? So that's also another intelligent system that's happening. And it's happening with trees. And then when we talk about other things like, essentially the mushrooms and things like that, this huge, these huge, almost like neural networks under the ground, all over the forest.
Probably neural network is the best way to think of the biosphere, actually, that it is completely connected. And the reason we're still able to live so well is because of its density of connections. And we've been removing connections without realizing, paving over connections, without realizing that's what we're doing. But yeah, I mean, the neural network analogy makes sense for everything, really, because if y'all come out with me, you can see just a little bit of water in the right spot. I mean, a little bit, a quarter of a gallon, through the air. I can get a wind. I can get a cloud. But it's not every time you move the water in that way. You have to find the right spot, kind of like a water witch. But you can sense that stuff. It's more about heat and pressure and aridity than some sort of stick that you're hoping is going to point you in the right direction. Just sensing hot spots, and you address that hot spot and the whole system goes as if it's relieved. Just like if you have a paper cut and you put a Band-Aid on it, your whole body goes, oh, thank God, I feel a little better. But you were focused on that paper cut. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that. This is a neural network at some level. It's intelligent, just not in the same cognitive narrative way that we think of intelligence.
Right. Well, actually, I know people that are studying AI-related things to try to make computers work better. And some of it's being modeled about how these networks, right? So brain networks we have, but there are also these natural networks, right? And they have redundancy and they have different capacities.
Yes.
And you mentioned that trees share 50% of our DNA or whatever. I've heard like mushrooms are like 90-something%.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very close. Okay. So
the brain and the mushroom are an interesting topic.
Right. So anyway, we like plants.
We are plants.
We are plants.
We're ambulatory plants.
We're ambulatory plants. So that got off topic. Okay, so that'll be the name of our title here. Ambulatory plants. Okay, we got way off track here, but not really.
Not really. I mean, I'm just we're talking about the fun stuff that's fascinating.
Well, my
Because the
dad,
science is simple and I wouldn't say boring, but if one person talks about it a long time, it starts to sound boring.
my dad was, I mean, my dad grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. He's now 97. My mom's 96. They're still around.
Is this in Texas?
No, they live in Wisconsin.
Okay.
But they're still together. And, I grew up also in a family that was religious and kind and all that kind of, was lucky. Yeah, I really didn't have to go through a lot of stuff that most people have to go through. I was really lucky, so I saved my disasters for self-created things I did later. But my dad, even when we were little, my dad used to like to take us for hikes or to take us out, fishing or looking for butterflies or things like this. And what his expression would be is, we're going to God's country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he called it some special places that he had where he would go fishing or we'd go to get away. Right. And he said, now we're on hallowed ground. That's what we're on.
Mm-hmm.
This is sacred territory. Okay. But I didn't realize at the time the significance of what he was saying, right? Because sometimes I would be like, well, I want to go play with my friends. Okay. This is boring. We're in nature. It's like boring.
There's nothing to look at.
There's nothing to look at. I'd be interested in the water for a little while, but only if I could catch fish or something or jump in or out. But I didn't have patience for that. I wish I would have at the time stuck and learned more of it, right? Because the benefits are big. And now when people ask me to go, sometimes you'll do a visualization exercise where they'll say, go back to a place that makes you feel happy or comfortable or whatever it is, right? Almost invariably, I go back to this place that my folks took me to, that they owned this little 40 acres of land up in northern Wisconsin, and it was by a creek, and it was in this green, pine forest area. And I go back to that place in my mind, okay? And virtually every time, and I can still see it. I can see the root beer colored water. It was root beer colored water because
What color?
Root beer colored.
Root beer.
But it was clear.
Yeah.
But it ran through iron and dark land and stuff like that. And it was like rocky granite was around there, and little waterfalls, and the pine trees mainly, but not all pine trees. It was just, some of them were just deciduous trees. But I go back, clearly I can, as I'm thinking right now, I go right back there. And it was very, it still has a memory for me, and it always will. It's where I go back to. And I go, God, that was pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have some stuff like that, not as maybe picturesque, but grew up in Barton Hills when that was a middle class neighborhood. And, we just had a big yard with big trees and a little forest next door. And so playing outdoors just meant being out in basically a natural setting in downtown Austin area, kind of like if you were a kid on your property here.
What street were you on?
Arpdale.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, where Cliff Drive is?
Probably.
That's off of Kinney and
yeah.
right up from where Umlauf Gardens is.
Yeah, I love that.
That whole area, right? So beautiful area.
Yeah. And Topanga Canyon-esque, I recently learned when I was out in LA.
Okay.
But the thing also about this sort of challenge of getting people to try things outdoors, we've made ourselves into an indoor species, and there's plenty of reasonable reasons for that. But we watch a lot of media about how scary forests are and how dangerous the outdoors is and how it's lions, tigers, and bears everywhere. And I can tell you for one thing, tragically, there's almost no wildlife out there right now. It's so bad. The droughts are so bad. But also, if you want to experience serenity, like what you're talking about, if you want to get away from all of the things, get away from people and go be with other species, because they're not focused on what's on your phone, and they're actually trying to be in a peaceful, balanced, invigorated place. And as soon as they can get to this silky air and flowing water and golden light and tranquil quality, just in the energy in the air, they do. And they hold that as long as they can, the land-based ecosystems. Whether it's a forest or a pasture, that's what the system is trying to do, is kind of get into a good place. And then, yeah, sure, every now and then a desperate lion will eat a human or whatever. A snake will strike somebody who steps in the wrong place. But it's not that nature is predatorial on humans, and that's the attitude we have. The reality is probably that every single living thing knows that humans are death. And it's scared, and it doesn't want to interact with humans. And so if you see a snake, that snake's like, oh shit, this thing could kill me, and it's reacting, right? It's not natural for snakes to just attack people. And again, I've been out for months and months and months. I haven't seen a single snake in 5 years. I've spent 50% of my time outdoors for the last 2 years. So
yeah,
we have a problem. We don't have wildlife right now on the natural landscape. I don't see insects. I don't see birds. I don't see other plants when I go to these places. I just see trees and little, yellow grass at best. But when I leave, that changes. And what changes with that is the serenity comes back. And this is, an important note is like, once the system is back in a hydrated state, I've seen this in Arizona, Oregon, and Texas. And, wasn't really paying attention elsewhere, but the air quality gets silky and smooth. It's part of that thing about being in the forest you're talking about as a kid on hallowed ground. And Austin has it because we have such a big canopy. When I drove back up into town just day before yesterday, I was like, I can breathe better here. I can breathe better here than I could in Lakey. The air is easier to breathe here. There's more oxygen in it or something. That whole thing of silky air, smooth air, cool air that's at the perfect temperature. It's like a best day at the beach where you can be out in the sun and it feels good, not like it's burning, like it's warm on your skin, everything. That's natural. That's nature in its optimum state. And that makes everybody happier. People just chill out. You can feel the anxiety go away because suddenly your body is like in an ideal state.
Happens every time we go to Barton Springs.
Yeah, and you can't get it with an AC unit. You can get pretty close with an AC unit, but you can only really get it when the whole system is moving moisture through all these leaves and all these creatures. And, it's part of a circulatory reality that is what we're really based on as biological beings.
So, Chris, where do we find you? Where do we find what you're doing, what you're up to? How do we locate you on social media these days so people can help and learn about this stuff?
Yeah, we're taking donations, and biointegrity.net or .com is the website. I don't have biointegrity.org, but I am a nonprofit. BioIntegrity, B-I-O integrity, and .net is my preferred suffix. And then YouTube. I'm trying to actually put more content there. That seems to be the way to connect with people for what I'm doing right now. So the website is really set up to be a quick way to get an orientation on what these 5 things are: rainmaking with trees, strategic watering, securing forests, forest moisture circulation stimulation, which I don't have a cute name for yet, and WTF, water, trees, and forests. These are kind of the 5 aspects of what we've been talking about today that you can do with buckets and trees and soil and trees to eliminate drought. And the website is there to be the teachable resource, and the content is on YouTube so you can see me doing it. That's where to go.
Well, thank you. And what I like about this is you are out there making a difference, and we can make so much more difference if more people get involved, and you get excited about doing this, which is great. I mean, the idea that you get excited when you get up to go water trees is fantastic. And it's about time, isn't it, that we nurtured our natural environment, okay, before we get to a point where we're fleeing for flames.
Yeah.
Which is without being a fearmonger, it's going to happen if we don't do stuff.
Look at the Palisades.
Palisades is there.
This is the antidote.
But, I hear Austin could be right down the road from that pretty soon.
I know we're wrapping up, but I think the Palisades, it has created an unreasonable fear that's sort of popular. And then again, if we could just do 1,000 gallons of water in every town, that alone would turn things around. If we could do 10,000 gallons, we'd probably move the whole system out of drought pretty quickly this year. So, yes, everything is in drought everywhere. Everything is fire prone potentially everywhere for the rest of time until we solve this drought problem. It's flipped. The system is in dire crisis, but this is the easy, accessible, water-efficient solution that you can do anywhere there's trees, and then the more forest you have, the more effective it is.
What I'm seeing is the water tables are getting massively jacked.
There's a lot of straws in the
Oh
in the
my
water
God!
table now.
Right, like I was
And
seeing.
not much rain to replenish
There's
it.
not much rain to replace it, and we're seeing, the industry is so heavy. Farming is certain types of farming very heavy, but industry, oh my God, millions of gallons a day go into, these manufacturing plants like Tesla or
Oh, man.
if
We
you
were
if you
talking about that.
if you yeah, that's pretty big. And if you go down to the place that are making plastics or natural gas or chemical factories and things like, enormous amount of water they're using.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't mean to start a war on Tesla, but that was posted as something that was good for the environment. But people forget the use of resources that go into these things. We got to be conscious of it. And we can't just burn the water up like we're doing.
Yeah, literally.
We're burning it up.
To touch on that without slamming Tesla or Elon,
Yeah.
the Austin Gigafactory has 2 of the hottest furnaces on the planet. All of the hottest furnaces are owned by Tesla. And those in Austin, those are running 24/7 is my understanding. And then there's 3 or 4 gigafactories. And 2 years ago, there were 10 of those furnaces that Tesla had commissioned. And we went into serious drought right after that factory got put up. And they started drawing water out of the Colorado and running those furnaces. And then the Samsung plant came in 15 more miles downstream, and we had 3 chip fabs, basically, in terms of heat. All of a sudden, in Central Texas, with the conditions of not getting rainfall, with them
Right.
drawing down the river, with them sending hot water back into the river, I'm assuming, because why would they chill it? That's just cost some money. So these environmental solutions, again, like we don't have a high enough standard for what that means. We thought solar panels were going to do it all back in the 90s, and
Right.
it turns out they have cadmium and they have lithium that you have to scrape out of indigenous lands to make the panels. And there's very few. It's very hard to be good for the environment.
Very
right?
hard. Yeah, people
What
think
I'm doing actually has almost zero downsides, other than I have to drive a diesel truck to get there.
yeah.
Well,
But
but the return on investment, the water I get back for the water I put in, is beyond exponentially big. It's beyond loaves and fishes. Put in 1, get 10 back. It's like I get 1,000 back on what I put in. But we just don't have very many models yet because we don't really think of it as a life support system. We think of it as a thing that's never going to go away, like our bodies. And how far can I push this thing? It's like we're in our 20s when we come to the environment. How many nights can I get drunk in a row and still be at work at 8 a.m. the next day to kick ass at the law firm? This is what we're doing.
When we're maxing out our it's easy to see, the petrochemical plants as being destructive, and those kind of places. We're not really looking at in places like Austin or Silicon Valley. The impact of tech is pretty huge.
Yeah.
Okay, chip manufacturing, computer use, all these things. But making whatever the stuff is huge. I mean, there are in the county that's like Santa Clara County and the area, Bay Area, Silicon area.
Yeah.
There are like a massive amount of Superfund sites and a massive amount of underground, basically, vapor plumes of
Right.
toxic chemicals, okay, trichloroethylene and various other kinds of things that are used in the cleansing process of some of the products that go into these computers and chips and what have you. It's huge. People think, wow, that's a clean looking area. And tech's a clean industry. Oh my God, it's not as dirty as oil and gas. Well, slow down, bucko.
Right.
Okay, it can be even worse.
Yeah, we just lost another coral reef to the batteries that we're using to save the environment. That kind of stuff is happening, unfortunately.
It's happening, right?
Yeah,
So
and it's just, we have to be better.
we have to be better. We have to be
For
better.
our own good. It's not ethical. It's like we're actually in trouble and we need to move, we need to advance here. And we need
Right.
to advance into a relationship with reality
Yeah.
that's biological. And, I think it'll work out well if we do.
Well, time to do it. All right, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mark.